All right, on Tuesday, President Ramaphosa addressed the nation in South Africa on further economic and social measures in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. This included the additional funding of over 20 billion rands, which will therefore be made available to municipalities for the provision of emergency water supply, increased sanitation of public transport and facilities, and also to provide food and shelter for the homeless. Last night, as you may have heard, that the president also addressed the nation and announced that the lockdown conditions would be slightly reduced, but that many regulations will still remain in place. Let's get reaction now from Amnesty International South Africa, and we speak to the media officer there, Mienke Steytler, who joins us now live via Skype. Good afternoon to you, Mienke. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel. So let's just go back a bit to the announcement by the president on Tuesday. Your reaction first to the 20 billion rand that's been set aside towards this emergency water supplies and support for the homeless.
Yes, of course, we welcome it. It is a welcome step. But just in your clip beforehand, I was smiling because, yes, we don't want to see a COVID commission. The government itself has admitted that there has been money that has, been mismanaged in the past. And we are saying that fantastic 20 billion rand, but they need to be transparent, accountable, and progressive around the way that this money is spent. With transparency, we mean every single cent must be, publicly communicated. Accountability, we need to know what the impact of this money is. We need to see it. And progressive is, what are they doing looking into the future, looking into a post-pandemic world? Yes, that feels impossible now, but how, for example, is water and adequate housing going to be made a reality for people beyond the pandemic, not only during the pandemic?
And I think part of what you've raised, you've just mentioned that as well now, relates to corruption and perhaps mismanagement of funds. So how do you think things should be done in terms of ensuring that every cent is accounted for?
Yes, so we need, we are actually calling on weekly reports of how that money is being spent, where it's going, where the water, for example, is being delivered, where the housing is being provided as well, how it's being provided, who's doing the work, and who's monitoring it as well. We've launched a campaign on water in particular because we find that obviously that is your first line of defense against the virus, but also we want to call on, it's one thing delivering tanks, but are those tanks going to be kept full? Are they going to be kept full of safe water? What does this cost? Where is this money going? How are they being monitored? And who's going to make sure that these municipalities, do the job that they should be doing?
And I suppose that also relates to your Right to Water 10 on the Tap campaign, where you looking into three issues: transparency, accountability, and progressive.
Exactly. So anyone can join this campaign. It's not just us. They can visit our website and take action there. But we felt it was important. We do, of course, acknowledge that these are uncertain times for the government and for everybody. We also acknowledge the work that they have been doing over the last few weeks. But we call on them to take this another step. And especially when this money was announced, the transparency, the accountability, and the progressiveness has to be put in place, and it needs to be done with all relevant stakeholders, with civil society, with the communities that are affected, and everything must be out in the public. And we need to know how are these human rights being realized for people, and we feel very strongly about that. So we will continue with this campaign. And we really hope that we can engage with the government. We have already to a degree, but also that we can see plans and concrete plans with timelines coming into place and actually happening.
So yesterday, the president addressed the nation once again, a very much anticipated speech it was last night, really explaining how South Africa has done in terms of delaying the spread of the coronavirus. So he says that there is now clear evidence that the lockdown has indeed been working, and also indicated that beyond the end of the month, the country should begin a gradual and phased recovery of economic activity. Your take on the entire contents of last night's speech?
Yes, so of course, for us, this does lengthen as far as we're concerned, this does make the impact on people's lives continue for a bit longer. The one thing that this virus has done, it has brought the inequalities in South Africa into stark light again, inequalities that have existed for decades and decades and decades. And obviously the lockdown has actually made some of these inequalities even harsher with your most vulnerable, with your people who are really living under the breadline, on the poverty line, most affected, but also, I suppose, most at risk of becoming sick because they don't have the water, or if they don't have the living conditions to keep themselves safe. They also are, I see you're showing the police there, you know, they're also the ones that are probably impacted by the police and army presence the most. We've heard reports of alleged police and army brutality, which we've been watching closely. So, you know, so for us, it's great to hear that there will be a gradual reducing of the lockdown, but it is important that we don't stop working towards keeping the most vulnerable safe and really putting their human rights first. I heard in your previous clip as well about the food banks, and we all need to work together as a nation, but as the government as well, that we don't slow down just because we think that it's being lifted. We must realize that even with a slight lifting, a lot of people are still impacted, and it's important to, you know, put people first.
So we're currently on level 5 for this COVID-19 coronavirus, which of course the president has said that will be lowered to level 4 with effect from the 1st of May. This means that some activity will be allowed, some businesses will be allowed to resume operations under specific conditions. Your take on that particular point, more so looking into our economy in the country?
Exactly. Interestingly, the day that we enter level 4 is World Labor Day, which marks, you know, all the which celebrates and marks all the work that workers do all across the world. And it is important. Many people's bread and butter are their jobs. It's their daily jobs. Not everybody can work from home. Not everybody is still earning a salary. So there should be some light relief regarding this. But time will tell. It'll be interesting to see how this is phased in. They were speaking of 1/3 of your workforce, but some people's 1/3 is 3 people, and other people's 1/3 is maybe 500 people. So they must make sure that where these industries are started up again, that there are also, personal protective equipment, PPE, that there are ways and means for people to social distance from each other, and to, of course, wash their hands or sanitize their hands. All those things do need to be put in place. But hopefully, what we will see is there will be maybe a slight, lightening of the burden that's being carried, and hopefully a slight, people can start putting food on the table for their families again.
Yes, indeed. All right, that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you so much for coming through. That's Mienke Steytler, who's a media officer at Amnesty International South Africa, talking to us about their reaction really to President Ramaphosa's last night speech. Moving along now, a local transportation initiative in Eersterust, east of Pretoria, is facing an uncertain future after operating for 4 years. The tuk-tuks have never had an operating license